to the Syrian, to the Free Syrian Army fighters. And now, more or less, there is a stalemate between, especially in Homs and in Aleppo, the Free Syrian Army have won on some battles yesterday and the day before. Could you tell us enlighten us with what's happening on the ground nowadays, and how do you see the involvement of the Arab countries that are supporting the Free Syrian Army? Name it, maybe he met with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia a few days ago, and some analysts are saying that most of the Arab countries are supporting the Free Syrian Army. How well do you read that, sir?
Well, I've just came back from Syria, actually, and to see what is on the ground.
Okay.
What is, from the West, there is a lot of talk. Nothing came. And from the Gulf states, yes, there is little weapon come, but not as sophisticated as they might say, and very, very little. Compare that to the regime, what he's getting from Iran and Russia. And the United States, they knew all of that. The cost, if the United States, they want to look at it in terms of cost, we know nobody's going to come to cry for us. If nobody cried over 2.5 years, if human rights, they were not part of this game for 2.5 years, nobody's coming now to help us. We knew that. But what we say, look at your long-term interest. Lack of action will cost you more. We are Syrian. We've got 10,000 years of civilization behind us, and we know exactly who are our friend. This will settle one way or another. It might take longer than what expected, might take few years. It might take few years, but at the end of the day, we will win, no doubt about it. We knew as Syrian, we knew what we want. And more than that, you could say, you could ask the French, they came to Syria for 25 years. And a British general, he said, we went for most of the countries where the French, we were there to help people, except in Syria, we came to help the French to get out of Syria. And if the French, they couldn't create an Alawite country in Syria as they wanted to, they couldn't. They took part of Syria, they gave it to Turkey against international law. Yeah. Now, if they pressurized us, this Alawites, they are quite welcome to go and join their brother in Iskenderun. And this, we don't say it as a threat. This is a fact. When you pressure people hard and put them in the corner, they will come with something unbelievable. We hope it will not come to that. As for the weapon which came from the Gulf state, it is not enough. What they're sending is not enough. I went to a camp where I met over 400 officers, most of them over 40 generals, between the 400 colonels, and all of them, they sitting there drinking tea. They said, look, we want arms. That's what we want. We don't want salaries. We don't want anything, just what we want us. Give us arms and we finish the job. And look, just in Ramadan, in the last 2 weeks, 3 MiGs, 5 helicopters, they were shot down, over 1,000 people, 300 prisoners of war, about 17 generals, there are 7 towns. Even the first step to get to the presidential palace is being shelled in over the place. We making progress, but a slow progress. What we asking people for to help us with arms, nothing else, just arms, is to stop the killing. Stop the killing. And that is what it is. As a human, all of us, we have to stop killing. When everybody knows he used chemical weapon. Obama, he said chemical weapon is a red line, and that red line become pink and whatever color they're going to call it now these days. And now after 6 months, they will not even let United Nations come, and today 2 people, they coming on the Syrian regime term. What United Nations is for? What the Security Council is for? It is a joke, and we should stop this madness now. Otherwise, the Syrian people, as I said before, they not just they will not listen. Not this threatened regime of United Nations Security Council and big powers, they've done nothing. They've done what they want. They destroyed Syria. Now they've got a problem in their hand. The problem is not just ours. It will be theirs.
Okay. Dr. Abdelaziz العويشق, sir, if you remember the Iraqi the Iraqi conflict?
On the Iraq part, sorry, on the Iraq part, when you say we went 5 years into Iraq, they didn't have to go to Iraq. They went for different motives. They didn't have United Nations behind them. So another excuse. Syria is completely different from Iraq. They went to Iraq because of oil, but in Syria there is a human rights case. What the Syrian people asking for is not different from any American or anybody anywhere else. What we want, dignity and freedom. That's all what we're asking for, democracy, dignity and freedom. Is that too much to ask?
No, it is not. Dr. Abdelaziz, let me go back to my question, sir. The most beneficiaries of the Iraqi conflict were the Kurds. They have their enclave, Arbil, and the president is Kurdish. The prime minister of Arbil and Kurdistan is Kurdish. Masoud al-Barazani is Kurdish. So the most winners of the conflict mostly were the Kurds in the conflict of Iraq. Do you think they are playing on the same tune nowadays to create an enclave, as you said a while ago, on the northern part of Syria, and from there they might also look for a separation from Turkey and establish their country? So do you think we are again, now we are facing different groups with different ideas and intentions of each group in Syria, sir?
Right. I mean, we will not discuss Iraq, what happened in Iraq, but in Syria, I think it's there may be a few dreamers who think that they can establish an enclave in northern Syria, but
as he said, Mohammed al-Faris and
right. But I think it's just unrealistic for several reasons. One is that the Kurds in Syria have not gone through similar experience in Iraq. Fortunately, I mean, there was a extermination in Iraq by the regime. There was international sympathy to the Kurds in Iraq to protect them from, at the time, the regime of
during the
Saddam Hussein.
Halabja massacre.
Yes.
And
there was also critical mass of population in Iraq that there isn't in Syria. It's much smaller. And third, there isn't the desire among the Kurds themselves, by and large, to have their own state. They may yearn for cultural affirmation, cultural identity, but that's different from creating a separate state or even an autonomous state. And then third, you have the issue of Turkey. Turkey definitely will not tolerate a PKK dominated or even friendly state on its borders. So I think it's just really a futile dream if there are people who are thinking about it. I just wanted to comment on some of the things that Dr. Khalid mentioned. I certainly sympathize with him, and I think the international community has, by and large, failed the Syrian people, and they really have to rely on their own resources for the time being and their Arab brothers and neighbors. But I mean, the UN is a prime example. I think the UN has abdicated responsibility towards the Syrian people. Whether it's UN Security Council being blocked by the
Russians and Chinese,
by the Russian veto, or the UN Secretariat itself, I think, is not doing enough to help the Syrians, whether at the humanitarian level or at the political level or other levels. So I agree with him regarding the UN. Also, I think the Europeans, while there is, I think it's a very good thing that they have designated the Hizbollah as a terrorist group or its military wing. But on the other hand, they have backtracked on the promises to provide arms for the Syrians to defend themselves. The British and the French earlier have promised to deliver weapons. I think they have backtracked on that, unfortunately. The other European countries, the Germans and the others, have no intention, in fact, and they have said so. They have no intention to help the Syrian people. So that leaves, I think, the Syrians with very few options. First, obviously, the Americans. The Americans, I think there's an American saying that says, once bitten, twice shy. And I think in this case, they have been twice bitten in Iraq and in Afghanistan. There is very little support, as David said, for straight, outright military intervention in Syria, regardless of all the good arguments that we can think of. But however, I think there is, David mentioned a good development this week, which is when the Congress,
the two committees,
and also the Congress has waived or has is no longer objecting to the little support that the administration is willing to give. And there is progress in the American position. First it was non-lethal, and then there is now some lethal support. But I think the Syrian people have to get support wherever
the
they
Syrian
can.
Army haven't received anything as Dr.
Right, I mean, delivery takes some time, but at least a decision has been made. And that leaves then the regional powers, Turkey and the Arab neighbors, and I think they're all serious. They're very serious about helping the Syrian people. And I think we saw this week a few advances in Homs. They were able to stand their own. In Dar'a, in the southern part, they have made some gains. In Aleppo, as you mentioned in the beginning, they're also making advances. So I think things are not all bleak.
Okay. Ambassador David, I just want, in 1 minute, sir, if you give me, now you've said there are 2 committees in the Congress, Dr. Abdelaziz commented on that. On the horizon, how do you see, is there any solution by the Americans to help the Syrian people who are being killed every day by massacres in every city? Now we have reached more than 100,000 killed people in Syria alone. What are the good news that we can hear from your side?
Well, Hussein, it's very, very hard to see what a successful outcome in Syria will be during the short term. But I do appreciate the comments by your guest in London, Dr. Khalid, because he's made it very clear that the Syrian National Coalition and the Syrian fighters on the ground are prepared to keep on fighting as long as it takes. It is our view that we can be helpful, but we cannot, and I certainly agree with your other 2 guests, we cannot rely upon the United Nations at this point. I was very unhappy to see that Lakhdar Brahimi, the emissary for the Secretary General, has even opposed the U.S. decision to start providing weapons to the Syrian rebels, even in these limited quantities. So I think, but I am encouraged that there's going to be effective and improved coordination among the United States, Turkey, and the Gulf Cooperation Council, and Jordan, and that we are going to see some better trends that I hope will get the message through to the Damascus regime that their future lies in a negotiated solution with the Syrian National Council.
Okay. David Mack,
Syrian National Coalition.
Okay, former Vice President of Middle East Institution, former U.S. Ambassador, and former Deputy Assistant for the Middle East, David Mack. From London, Dr. Khalid Qamaruddin, the President of the Coalition of the Syrian Revolution. Last but not the least in the studio, Dr. Abdelaziz Al-Awayshig, Assistant Secretary General of the GCC for International Negotiations. The viewers, the Syrians need our support, especially in this holy month of Ramadan. The custodian of the 2 holy mosques have made it clear last 2 years ago in Ramadan, where he helped the Syrian brothers with more than 700 million Saudi riyals. And we need more donations for the poor people, for the misplaced, and for the refugees. We should support all the Syrians just to keep our brothers living. On behalf of the Executive Director, Ubaydullah bin Muhammad Al-Ubaydullah, Director Hiyam Al-Kilani, Head of Operation Team, Abdullah Al-Mansour, we all wish you good night.